The night my mother, Lillian, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You'll never be half the person your brother Marcus is." She wasn't just comparing siblings. She was drawing a line in blood across my identity. For years, I had swallowed every insult like medicine I wasn't allowed to spit out. But this moment didn't taste like bitterness. It burned like a warning flare. Something inside me, long muted, had finally risen without permission. I kept my hands folded, even as my spine straightened with the weight of everything I had carried silently. My brother sat beside her, smirking in that polished, hollow way he always had, like being praised came as naturally to him as breathing. My father didn't say a word as usual, just lifted his glass halfway to his lips before he noticed the shift in me. When I pushed back my chair and said, "Then let Marcus pay your rent," the sound cracked through the room like thunder under marble. My father's hand froze mid-air. My mother blinked once, twice, still expecting me to apologize. Marcus leaned forward, his face twisted with curiosity, not guilt. But I didn't flinch. They didn't know it yet, but I was done being the quiet one. The daughter who gave and gave while they built altars around Marcus. By the time this night was over, the secret I had buried for 3 years would finally rise to the surface. And nothing in that house would ever look the same again. It didn't start with a betrayal. It started with a favor, wrapped in worry, dressed in urgency, delivered with tears. That's how family debt begins, not as a transaction, but as emotional blackmail wrapped in love. Mom called late on a Tuesday, voice shaking, words tumbling out about a missed mortgage payment. "Just this once," she whispered, like she was ashamed to ask. I sent $1,400 without hesitation. I even told myself I was proud to help. That first transfer was a lifeline, or so I thought, but lifelines have a way of twisting into leashes. The next week, it was Marcus's tuition shortfall. A month later, his car broke down. Then the roof needed repairs. The heating went out. Every request arrived dressed as an emergency, backed by guilt and the crushing reminder that I was the reliable one. "Just this once," became their chorus. Each plea came with a reason that made me feel like saying no would collapse the house entirely. By the end of the first year, I had transferred more than I made in 4 months, and still, they said nothing of thanks, only more requests. My brother didn't speak to me unless he needed money. My parents never asked how I was, only what I could give. I paid the mortgage the bank never threatened to take. I funded repairs I never saw. I was financing a family who had already decided my value was measured in what I could hand over. They told the world Marcus saved the house. But it was my account that bled every time the roof leaked, the furnace broke, the tuition deadline loomed. I was the safety net no one ever saw, because I was never meant to be seen. But even invisible things leave records, and I had kept every one. The worst kind of drowning is the kind no one notices. When you're smiling in family photos you were never invited to take, and the only evidence of your pain is a balance sheet buried in your inbox. Before the morning, I chose to stop carrying their weight. I lived in a quiet kind of collapse. Not dramatic, not visible, just steady erosion of trust, of joy, of the version of me that used to believe love didn't come with a ledger. I stopped buying new clothes, not because I couldn't afford them, but because I needed to be ready. Ready for the next phone call, the next, just this once, the next crisis that would position Marcus as helpless and me as heartless if I didn't save the day. Birthday parties came and went. I wasn't invited. No cake, no card, no call. Just photos on social media of a family I was financing from the sidelines. My brother dented my car and didn't say thank you. My parents took trips they swore they couldn't afford, until Marcus posted the vacation pictures. Every night, I checked my bank account like it was a wound I was afraid to touch. Red numbers stared back at me, pulsing with shame. I told myself I was being generous, but deep down, I knew I was being erased. I stopped talking about it. Friends would say, "But it's your family," like that made it easier, like blood made it noble. I started laying on the floor at night, not because I had fallen, but because standing felt dishonest. I felt like a ghost in my own story, a donor with no plaque, a scapegoat with no crime. It wasn't just the $72,000 I lost. It was 3 years of watching my identity get rewritten in Marcus's handwriting. 3 years of becoming someone whose absence was more comfortable for them than her presence. And even in that darkness, something small had begun to grow. An awareness, a stillness, a thought I couldn't ignore for much longer. What if I stopped letting them do this? The day I stopped answering their calls, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like air returning to lungs I didn't know were starved. I didn't make some grand announcement. I just got quiet, and in that quiet, I found something they never gave me: space to become someone who didn't apologize for existing. Thursday nights became sacred. I taught myself to cook again, small things at first, a carrot ginger soup that finally earned applause from coworkers at a potluck. Sunday mornings, I ran along the river until my legs shook, until the pain in my chest came from exertion, not grief. At work, I stopped deflecting credit. I let my ideas breathe. When my director leaned over my desk and said, "Your focus is rare," I didn't dismiss it. I took it in, let it settle, let it mean something. Then came the email. A fintech startup in Seattle had been watching my performance metrics. They offered me more money, more equity, and something I hadn't felt in years: respect. Not as a savior, not as a wallet, but as a mind, a builder, a woman worth listening to. I accepted, packed my life into boxes, boarded a plane, landed in a city that didn't know my family, didn't care about Marcus, and had no idea who had preserved the family home. My apartment had a balcony with a view of the Space Needle. I posted one photo, just 2 words: new beginning, and for a moment, it truly felt like the past couldn't find me, but it always does. And this time, it arrived in the most familiar disguise of all: a lie dressed up as Marcus's achievement. The past doesn't always knock. It sometimes arrives with a banner, bold red letters waving in the wind, announcing a lie so loud it drowns out everything you survived. It was Mrs. Jensen who called. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, as if she knew the image she was about to describe would hit harder than anything my family had ever said out loud. "Did you see the banner?" she asked. I hadn't, so she sent a photo. There it was, stretched across the porch of my parents' house. "Congratulations, Marcus, for preserving the family home." Red letters, white canvas. Neighbors gathered beneath it, smiling. My father in his pressed blazer. My mother, glowing like sacrifice had never cost anyone anything. And Marcus, front and center, arms folded, face smug, the hero they chose to invent. My throat went dry. I stared at the image for 10 minutes, not moving. They weren't just pretending I hadn't helped. They were rewriting history. They were wrapping my 3 years of silence around Marcus like a cape. And that was when something inside me shifted again, not in anger, not in grief, but in precision. I didn't cry. I didn't call them. I reached for the folder instead, the one labeled "For Later," because later had finally come. And this time, I wasn't going to be erased quietly. The first time I saved a screenshot, I wasn't planning revenge. I was preserving reality. Because in this family, truth had a habit of being edited in Marcus's favor. It happened months before the banner. Marcus had messaged me, casually requesting $6,000 to cover just a little help. When I hesitated, he responded, "Don't be dramatic." That's when something snapped, not in rage, but in record keeping. I stared at those words, "Don't be dramatic," until they stopped sounding like English. That wasn't a request. It was erasure. A way to make my exhaustion look like hysteria. That night, I created a folder on my laptop. Named it For Later. I didn't even know what later meant yet, but I knew I needed to start tracking the weight they pretended didn't exist. Every time they reached out, I saved the message. Every transfer, I logged. I dug through old bank statements, flagged every payment made to cover their emergencies. I found 36 messages that said, "Just this once." It didn't feel like obsession. It felt like survival. A lifeline of facts in a world that bent to Marcus's version of events. As the folder grew, so did my clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was a daughter turned financier turned footnote, finally collecting the evidence of her own erasure. And when that banner went up, I knew it was time to bring the truth into the light. Quietly, deliberately, publicly. Revenge doesn't always look like fury. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet, a binder, a USB drive. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I built. Page by page, I laid out the truth, not in emotion, but in data. Numbers that couldn't be ignored. Patterns that told the real story. Bank statements stretched across my table like scars. I color-coded each transfer. Added timestamps. Labeled every "just this once" in red. I calculated the total, $72,000, and circled it in bold. Then I printed the texts. Every guilt trip, every manipulation, every message that said, "Only you can help us," as if I hadn't already been helping for years. I took screenshots and inserted them into a slide deck. Each one paired with the date and the $sign. There would be no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. By sunrise, it wasn't just evidence. It was a case, bound and sorted, with a matching USB tucked into my bag. That afternoon, my cousin mentioned the family appreciation dinner. They were planning to honor Marcus. Again. Same script, new setting, and I knew I would be there, not to clap, not to stay silent, but to return what was mine. The narrative. They thought I had disappeared. They thought I had given up. But I had just been getting organized, and this time, when they handed Marcus the crown, I would be standing in the spotlight too, holding the receipts. I didn't walk into that restaurant to make a scene. I walked in to make history, my history, no longer edited out. The room was already full. Laughter floated through the windows. My relatives wore their best. Pressed shirts, polished shoes, and polished lies. Marcus stood near the slideshow projector, radiant in an emerald suit. The same one he wore the night they celebrated him for saving the family home. My mother flanked him, her hand resting proudly on his arm. My father nodded along to some rehearsed anecdote, drink in hand. No one looked for me. No one expected me. I hadn't RSVP'd, but I had arrived anyway, wrapped not in anger, but in certainty. I stood in the corner, unnoticed, watching slide after slide. Childhood photos, birthday cakes, family vacations, all framing Marcus like a myth. Then the screen shifted. The lights dimmed for the final tribute. And just like that, it was time. What they expected was another image of Marcus in glory. What they got was the truth, cold, calculated, and undeniable. And once it began, there was no way to take it back. The final slide didn't praise Marcus. It indicted him. It indicted them all. And for the first time, the silence in that room didn't belong to me. It belonged to them. Across the screen, my spreadsheet unfolded line by line. Each transfer, each date, each, just this once, a mountain of sacrifice with my name at its base. Gasps cracked the air like glass. Aunts looked at uncles. Cousins leaned forward. No one blinked. The room had no oxygen left for denial. I stepped forward, heels tapping against marble. Not hurried, not hesitant. I stopped just left of center stage, turned toward the screen, then to the crowd. "If the truth embarrasses you," I said, my voice steady, eyes locked on my parents, "that is not my fault." More charts followed, screenshots of texts flickered by. "Can you just cover it this once? Don't be dramatic. You're the only one we can count on." 3 years. $72,000. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't demand an apology. I simply lifted a hand and let it rest on the final slide. This is the truth. Without it, that house would have been gone. You know it. I know it. And now, so does everyone else. They had spent years building a legend out of Marcus's reflection. But legends burn fast when you show them the receipts. And this room was finally on fire. No one moved, not out of respect, not out of fear, but because the lie had finally been suffocated and no one knew how to breathe without it. I stood there, still. Let the silence stretch. Not because I needed it, but because they did. Some truths deserve a pause long enough to echo. My mother's hands clutched her purse like it could protect her. My father's jaw worked as if words might come. None did. Marcus had already stepped back, the emerald suit dimmed under the weight of its stolen glory. I turned and walked toward the exit. My heels were the only sound in the hall. No one followed. No one called out. Not even to pretend. I paused at the door just once and looked back. They were frozen, half lit by the slideshow glow, haunted by the math they'd refused to believe. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was done. The proof wasn't in the numbers. It wasn't in the USB or the applause. The real proof was that when truth finally walked out, no one tried to stop it. I didn't walk away to punish them. I walked away to reclaim myself. For too long, I had funded their comfort at the cost of my identity. But the moment I stepped into that hall with the truth in hand, I stopped being their silence and became my own voice. I didn't need them to say thank you. I didn't need them to change. I only needed to make the lie stop living in my name. And now that it's over, I'm not angry. I'm free. Let them keep their version of the story. I have the original. If you've ever carried a family's silence, if you've ever been erased for someone else's comfort, your story matters too. Speak it, document it, reclaim it, because silence only protects those who never protected you. If this story moved you, subscribe for more slow-burn truths and quiet justice. We don't scream here. We build, we rise, and we remember.